Part 106. Danger from within. Before the battle began, the Prophet instructed the companions to gather the women of Medina and take them to Al-Fari, the fortress of the Banu Haritha. As previously explained, the Jews were distinct in their architectural ability. The Arabs did not acquire such skills, but the Banu Haritha attempted to emulate them. While it was not to the same standards, it was the biggest fortress from amongst the Arabs. Every able-bodied Muslim man would be protecting Medina from external forces, and so the women and children within Medina would be unprotected. Usually that would not be an issue, but the Prophet was wary of the Banu Qurayza and was suspicious of their true loyalties. The Prophet's suspicions were vindicated, as the Banu Qurayza had reneged on their oaths. Huyai ibn Akhtab, leader of the Banu Nadir, sneaked into Medina and rendezvoused with Ka'b ibn Asad, the chieftain of the Banu Qurayza. Ka'b ibn Asad initially refused as he swore his oath with the Prophet on 3 separate occasions. Huyai continued to implore him and promise his protection until Ka'b buckled. As the Prophet's suspicions grew, he called on his companions for a volunteer to enter upon the Banu Qurayza and investigate. Zubair ibn al-Awwam came forth, to which the Prophet uttered his famous praise, "Every prophet has his disciples, and my disciple is Zubair ibn al-Awwam." Zubair sneaked in on the Banu Qurayza and witnessed preparations for battle. He returned to the Prophet and said,
"O Messenger of Allah, I found them fortifying their fortresses and clearing their roads to facilitate the easy movement of their troops towards the Muslims. They have also gathered all their livestock."
This confirmed that the treaty was indeed broken. The Prophet did not want to take deeply consequential actions without verifying, so he sent 4 of the most senior members of the Ansar, who had close ties with the Banu Qurayza before Islam: Sa'd ibn Mu'ad, Sa'd ibn Ubadah, Abdullah ibn Rawaha, and Kawat ibn Jubair. They spoke to the Banu Qurayza directly, and it quickly became clear to them that they had no intention of upholding any agreement with the Muslims. They were received with arrogance and provocation. The Banu Qurayza mocked them and even denied the existence of the treaty. Sa'd ibn Mu'ad was so enraged that he began swearing and cursing at them, and the Banu Qurayza returned his insults in kind. Sa'd ibn Ubadah held Sa'd ibn Mu'ad back and said,
"Leave off cursing them, for the matter between us and them is now more than that."
In other words, they now have a lot more to worry about. When the Prophet sent the delegation, he instructed them to return and relay the information discreetly. He was camped in public amongst the Muslims and did not want to dishearten the Muslims or cause them to panic. When the delegation returned, they greeted the Prophet and said, "Adal and Al-Qara." They were the names of the 2 tribes that betrayed the Muslims in the massacre of Al-Raji, so the Prophet clearly understood the implication. The Prophet responded, "Allahu Akbar, this is good news and glad tidings." He had utmost faith in Allah to deliver success in this dire moment, and the treachery of the Banu Qurayza would, in time, prove to be a grave blunder. Eventually, news broke of Banu Qurayza's betrayal. Many companions described that night as the worst night of their lives. As they faced a 10,000-man external army, their wives and children were left unprotected from internal enemies. Allah states,
"Remember when they came at you from above, the Confederates, and from below, the Banu Qurayza, when your eyes grew wild in horror, and your hearts jumped into your throats, and you entertained conflicting thoughts about Allah. There and then the believers were put to the test, and were violently shaken." Surah 33, verses 10 to 11.
The companions did not disbelieve nor lose all hope, but facing disaster in all directions shook some of their hearts. Adding salt to their wounds, the hypocrites began causing strife, demanding to go back to Medina under the guise of protecting their families. One of them uttered,
"Here was Muhammad, promising us the treasures of Kisra and Caesar, Husro and Caesar, and now we cannot even go home and defecate.